Hello everybody, Harper O'Connor, aspiring Tran scholar here. Today we'll be exploring Reality Surf, one of Blade's most popular compositions and, dare I say, one of his most enigmatic works. And although the meaning of this piece eluded me, and I'm sure many of you for years, I believe that a thorough examination of the text elucidates a very clear and potent message, one that has the potential to radically transform your outlook on life. So, grab your boards, because we're going surfing.
It's alright, we got food. We got calm, saluted, yeah, it's real.
I believe that what we're hearing here is Blade reflecting on his career. It's common to refer to the positive results of hard work as the fruits of your labor. So Blade is sort of comparing his music to a tree that is beginning to bear fruit. In this context, the crowns most likely represent the awards, the accolades, the attention that Blade and his crew have received from the music. This reflection on fame and the idea of having made it is a really common reoccurring motif on 333. At times, we sort of see it braggadociously, like on Hero of My Story or Hundreds, and sometimes there's sort of a melancholy to it, like in Keys to the City or Only One. And I think that this era of self-examination is very understandable when we consider the context of this album. It's 2020, Blade has just released Ice Dancer. I think Ice Dancer kind of put him on the map for a lot of people. Obviously, any artist would love for their work to gain public attention, but Blade would know from firsthand experience that fame hasn't always been good for the people around him. So it makes sense that he would be conflicted. And even later in this song, we will see that conflict play out.
Put a concept on that feeling. Take a word and change the meaning only you.
In a certain sense, the ability to manipulate language is the ability to manipulate reality, since language is the tool that we use to process and perceive and communicate reality. Some among you may be familiar with the Republic. This is ancient Greek philosopher Plato's reflection on basically his ideal society. And one of the interesting things about the Republic, which is Plato's ideal form of government, is that the artists, the poets, are banished. So there's no artists in Plato's ideal society. Plato saw that artists had power over people because they had the power to, manipulate words and feelings and stir up people's emotions in a way that he thought was dangerous. Humans have long recognized the power of language and art and music to affect reality. So the artist, the person who is competent and precise and persuasive with his language, is a person with a lot of power. And Blade understands this. He understands this all too well, as we will see later in the song. After all, this is a guy who has achieved quite a bit just by singing into a microphone. By the way, this is also another common theme on Blade's music. So when Blade says put a concept on the feeling, he's explaining that he uses the creative act to give voice to things that he's feeling. He's drawing meaning out of nothing, basically, ex nihilo. When Blade says take a word and change the meaning, the most literal example of this is the central concept, probably, of Blade's music, and is his sort of personal philosophy, Drain. Now I won't get into the evolution of Drain too much here. That deserves its own video, honestly. But suffice it to say, this concept of Drain has evolved a lot over the years. It's evolved from something quite negative to something more spiritual and all-encompassing, as indeed Blade's musical work and his life outlook has as well. So, okay, we kind of have this bar figured out. Blade is talking about the creative, almost magical power, the transformative power of language and words. But let's not forget about those last couple bars. Take a word and change the meaning. Only you. Only you. Only you. A lot of people seem to think that this you is a romantic thing, or that he's talking to somebody in his life, or he's talking to God. And honestly, I don't like any of those interpretations. There definitely are romantic undertones on this album, but not necessarily on this song. And this song is chock full of spiritualism. But I don't really get the sense of a personified deity. In my opinion, the most straightforward interpretation of this is just that when he says you, he means you. He's talking to the listener. And I think if we proceed with that assumption in mind, it makes the rest of the song a lot clearer. So in this context, when Bladee is saying, take the word and change the meaning, only you, what does he mean? I think what he means by that is that only you have the power to take these words and choose the meaning of them. Only you have the power to put a concept on that feeling and decide what these lyrics mean, kind of like I'm doing right now. And in the same way, only you have the power to decide what your life means to you in a more general sense. You take this sort of ambiguous stimulus, whether it be the music or the patterns of your life, and you impose a meaning on it. This power of self-creation is totally in your hands, and it's your responsibility to take that power on. This is important, right? I want to stress this because this is basically the core idea of the song. Bladee is trying to empower us to change our fates and to reinterpret the story of our lives.
Take the house open the ceiling.
Okay, so this is sort of building on this theme of celebratory freedom, like spiritual vision and freedom from constraint. This bar is telling us to deck the halls, open the ceiling. Probably not of our houses, but of our minds. To deck the halls, to open the ceiling, means to see life as a celebration. It means to open yourself up to limitless possibilities. If we opened the ceiling, what would we see? The sky, the stars, endless space, and limitless potential. So when Bladee asks us to open the ceiling, he's asking us to open our minds.
On the white island, reality served. Reality served. Reality served. Reality served.
So what does it mean to reality surf? I did a little research, and I believe the namesake of this song and a lot of it, the concepts that it explores, are drawn from this obscure Russian spiritual text called Reality Transurfing, published by a man who goes by the name of Vadim Zeland. So this book, actually it's a series of books, explore how people can kind of like transform their reality by consciously aligning their focus with positive energy, which, as I've said, is basically the purpose of this song. So if the concepts that I explore in this song are inspiring to you in any way, that might be worth checking out. I haven't read them. I don't know if they're any good, but, you know, it's further reading if you'd like. All right, on to the second verse.
Venom in the fire. Enemies closer than you. Treat them into pine. Snakes slither in the spine. Take the fruit.
This stanza is a bit of a departure from the rest of the song, so I think it deserves specific examination. Obviously, these verses contrast somewhat with the positive tone of the rest of the song, but more than that, these lyrics are just so dense. They're just dripping with mysticism. This is Bladee at his most cryptic. So what's going on here? Well, for one thing, Bladee is returning to the metaphor of ripe fruit, but this time with a critical eye. The references to snakes, to fruit, to trickery obviously conjures the image of the creation story, whereas as the story is traditionally told, the devil in the form of a snake tricks Eve, who convinces Adam to disobey God and eat from the one tree that they were forbidden from. And as a result, we have to toil, we have to die, and we have to pay $300 for fake red light merchandise. Anyway, the astute among you may have also picked up on a reference to an enemy in the second line. In many Christian traditions, the enemy is a term used to denote Satan or just the forces of evil more broadly. So when Bladee says enemies closer than you, he's not lying. The snake is literally slithering around in his spine. Even though if you read the Genesis account, there's no evidence that the devil is the snake, or that the fruit is an apple, or that Adam was coerced, or that the snake tricked Adam and Eve, but I digress. Roman statesman Marcus Tullius Cicero once wrote, "The enemy is within the gates. It is with our own luxury, our own folly, our own criminality that we must contend." Now, is Bladee referencing Cicero in this song? I think not. But it's the same concept. Cicero is saying that the conflict in a state is not primarily external, it's primarily internal. In the same way that Bladee is using this song to explore an internal conflict. You know, normally we think of evil as like this external force, but here Bladee is saying the snake is slithering in the spine. He's wondering if his intentions are pure, He's questioning himself if he is perhaps giving us poison, if he's giving us something we're not ready for, if he's trying to trick us, if he's becoming the enemy. And what is the enemy here offering us through Bladee? Same thing he offered Adam and Eve. Fruit. Fruit from the tree of knowledge. So hopefully that has helped clear up these particular lines for you a little bit. But now you're probably thinking, hold on, this doesn't make sense in the context of the song. I thought that this was about positivity and changing your life for the better and, good energy and all that. And I totally hear that. These lyrics didn't make sense to me for the longest time. But I've come to an understanding of them that is at least satisfying to me, and it's this. I don't think Bladee sees himself as the devil. I think he's definitely explored his darker side on previous albums, and I think that he recognizes that, even after his spiritual awakening, he still has that capacity in him. So ultimately, I think that these lines are just kind of his way of telling us that he isn't the final authority on anything. We shouldn't take what he says as gospel. He's not infallible. And, this is a common theme. He's always saying some variation of like, hey, don't idolize me. I'm not special. I'm just a guy, which, I can appreciate. I think Bladee takes his position as an artist very seriously, and he wants to make sure he's not giving us anything that's going to lead us astray. To me, this bar raises two questions. Like, what is a dirty city? And what does it mean to throw cards? And maybe a third one, like, how can a city throw cards? So let's get into it. What is this city? It's dirty. It's filthy. It's trashed, perhaps. And as you may know, trash and filth are symbolically meaningful to Bladee. This is from the Fader interview. This material world, material things, it's all trash. The only true worth is what's inside you, man. The world is a trash island. In this context, I think it might make sense to view the dirty city as an allegory for the material world. And so the reference to cards here becomes clearer, because the world is the dealer. It's throwing cards at you, and these aren't playing cards. You can't play poker with the city. But the concept of luck of the draw is like a common expression to denote the sort of random nature of life. In other words,
oh well, play the cards that I'm given.
So when Bladee says still a dirty city throwing cards, he's telling us that the world will always throw challenges at us. It will be unpredictable. Things will never be totally under our control. And once again, this seems to cut against the ethos of the song, right? Like, what the heck? Isn't this all about freedom and like changing your life and sort of exercising control over reality? In answer to this, I would ask you to consider the surfer. The surfer doesn't have an unlimited range of possible moves. In fact, he is very much constrained by the waves and the movement of the tide. However, an experienced surfer can read the movements of the water and put himself at the right place at the right time. So if we can skillfully react to emerging conditions, we can position ourselves correctly and ride the wave of luck. So in a certain sense, you make your own luck.
Everything related back to you. I have never been the one to talk. Cinderella word if it sits.
You may think my interpretation here is a little bit of a stretch, but you're going to have to bear with me. Ultimately, I think these lines are about creative inspiration, where it comes from and where it goes. So for the first part of this, where does creativity come from? I mean, the obvious answer is a Swedish man named Benjamin Reichwald thought it up, and then he sang the words over a beat, and now we're all listening to the song. But Bladee denies this in the second line. He says, I have never been the one to talk, which begs the question, who have I been listening to for all these years? So to answer that, let me tell you a story from one of Plato's dialogues called Ion. So this is a narrative. It's a conversation between Socrates and the titular character, General Ion of Ephesus. Ion is a rhapsode. He performs the epic poetry of Homer, the Iliad, the Odyssey. The Greeks loved the Iliad and the Odyssey. That was their culture. They lived for Homer. They loved it. Couldn't get enough. It was like their religion, basically. So Ion performs the works of Homer, and he's good at it. He really knows how to move a crowd. But when Socrates speaks with Ion, he learns that Ion is not that smart. He really doesn't have any idea how he does what he does. He's not so much skilled as he is inspired. Now, this is obviously a worrying concept for Plato because, as we discussed, Plato doesn't really like artists too much. He thinks that they stir people up. And that's really bad if the guy who's stirring all the people up doesn't even know why he's doing it. But Bladee, being an artist himself, probably has a little more positive view on inspiration from the muse. So that's what I think "I've never been the one to talk" means. There have been a lot of great artists throughout history who have really insisted, I am not the one doing this. I think there's something to this concept of divine inspiration. Who can really say where an idea comes from? It's a mystery. So that's the first part answered. Where does inspiration come from? It comes from somewhere, but certainly not from the artist. But there's a second part, right? Where does inspiration go? How does inspiration live in the world once it's captured by an artist and embedded in a work? Well, for that, we can actually return to Ion. And if you're sick of me bringing up references to classical antiquity, sorry, it's not going to get better. Anyway, Plato says that Ion dangles like a lodestone at the end of a chain of lodestones. The muse inspires the poet, Homer in Ion's case, and the poet inspires the rhapsode. A lodestone, by the way, is like a magnet, but for our purposes, it's like just a rock. So there's a chain of inspiration here, which could be what Bladee means when he says everything related back to you. Bladee is inspired by some outside force, and in turn, his work inspires people who interpret it, which I guess would make me Ion. If we really internalize this understanding, what it means is that the thing that is being conveyed primarily is inspiration in itself, rather than like the strict sense of the lyrics as written. So if I'm understanding Blade's view correctly, music is only valuable, to the degree that it helps you connect with the muse. Obviously, Bladee meant something when he wrote this song, but for the listener, the only important interpretation is the one that they give it. Because all of this is ultimately related to how the music strikes you, it's only going to mean something if you vibe with it, if the glass slipper fits. Same goes for my interpretation. I think I've made a fairly persuasive case for my particular take on this song throughout the video, but if you don't like it, then I'm not going to argue with you.
Really test it, watch it fall apart. Looking for the arrow when you shoot.
Another cryptic line. Why would you build something just to watch it disintegrate? Doesn't make any sense. Let me tell you another story to illustrate this concept. This one comes from the mountains of Tibet, where Buddhist monks spend days preparing elaborate sand mandalas. After being completed, these gorgeous sand murals are exhibited for a time, and then they are ceremonially destroyed. This art style is a meditation on impermanence. Because after all, no matter how much we try to fight it, life is ultimately transient. Sand mandalas will be blown away in the wind, buildings will crumble, empires will fall, and people will grow old and die. Everything is impermanent. This is one of the fundamental insights in Buddhism. It's the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible. It's a big theme in Stoic philosophy. But, I think this leaves the question unanswered. Like, why do anything if it's impermanent? If it's just going to be blown away? And I think the second line provides kind of a witty answer to this. When you shoot a bow, you'd be a fool to devote your attention to the flight of the arrow. You want to know whether you're hitting the target that you aim for, but fundamentally, if you want to shoot a bow well, you would be wise to devote most of your focus to the way that you're drawing the bow, how you're pointing the bow, rather than where the arrow is going when you've already shot it. Whether the arrow flies straight, whether it's blown away by the wind, that's not in your control, so it wouldn't be wise for you to focus on that. Instead, you would do well to focus on the process and not think so much about the outcome. So for example, when I make these videos, I try not to think about like, how can I get more followers? How can I make money off this? How can I come off cool? I'm trying to think about, how can I tell a more compelling story? How can I help people understand this song on a deeper level? How can I get 1% better at video editing today? In order to do anything long term, you kind of have to have this orientation of thinking about the process rather than the outcome. Ironically, I think it's this mindset that will ensure my success in the long run. So even though these bars might not seem to fit the wider theme of the song, they really do, because it's all about properly aligning your attention. And when we adopt this mindset, we start to understand why it might make sense to build something even though we know that it's ultimately going to fall apart, because the meaning was in the building itself. This concept is also further explored on Oh Well.
3 towers, but it's in the sun.
These 3 towers most likely are a reference to Bladee, Echo 2K, Tyboy Digital. Towering musicians though they are, Bladee understands that soon him and his crew and all their musical achievements will be lost to the sands of time. But does this make their friendship any less valuable? No, of course not. The fact that life is impermanent doesn't make it meaningless. It makes it all the more special while it's happening. This theme of impermanence is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I decided to write it up in a short story. If you find me at all insightful, or you like any of the concepts I've explored throughout this video, then you might find that story interesting. So I'll leave a link to it in the description. Totally free, by the way. I'm not trying to sell you anything. Okay, back to the song.
You take yourself seriously, stop.
It's kind of like a playful tone here, right? There's like a tinge of amusement to this bar. It's like when you see a little kid in a suit, like, oh, he takes himself so seriously. Look, he's got his little sweater on. Oh, you think you know how the world works. You got all kinds of plans. You're stressed out about things all the time. Realistically, you're a monkey. Seriously, go look in the mirror. Take your shirt off. You're an ape. That's kind of funny. So yeah, life is scary. It can be painful. It can be really uncomfortable. But by the same token, it's a journey. It's a game. It is exploratory. You know, it's surfing. So just don't take yourself so seriously. Enjoy the ride if you can.
Listen to your heart. Mirror the reflection of the law.
Once again, we return to the key concept of this song, which is that life is a mirror that reflects your internal mental state. Obviously, there's degrees to this idea depending on how far you want to go with it. Do your thoughts by themselves like access this universal consciousness and change reality? Or is it just that like shifting your perceptions and judgments to the world changes your behavior and how other people perceive you? You know, I prefer the second. I find it a little more grounded, but you know, Cinderella, wear it if it suits. There's multiple ways to receive this concept. Nearing the end now.
I just wanna show you something new. Everything's funny when you see my life is so cartoon.
When Bladee says, I want to show you something new, he means the same thing as Deck the Halls, Open the Ceiling. Like, hey, open your mind. I want to introduce a new concept to you. I want to throw something at you you may have not heard before. Or, you know, perhaps put a concept on the feeling and kind of like put words to something that you already, you know, are feeling intuitively. If you're willing to stop taking yourself so seriously, you know, open the ceiling of your mind and be willing to see something new, you'd realize that life is funny. Life is play. Life is a journey. Life is a cartoon. And the best part of this cartoon is that you have the ability to channel surf, change your life by adopting this new mindset of growth and exploration and openness. My life a movie? No. My life a cartoon. Thanks for joining me today. This was a bit of a long one. I'm not really into like the whole manifestation, law of attraction thing. I find it kind of corny, to be honest, but the way that Bladee explores those concepts, or at least like kind of adjacent concepts in this song, is very tasteful. It's a very well done song, and so you know, I'm just grateful to have the chance to kind of analyze this. I hope you liked this video. Yeah. Until next time.